A game for the ages, and the Minnesota Wild come out on top 3-2 in double overtime to take a 1-0 lead against the Dallas Stars. We break down everything about a pivotal start to this series on today's Locked On Wild POSTCAST.
You are Locked On Wild POSTCAST, part of Locked On Sports Minnesota, your team every day.
Minnesota Wild start off their series against the Dallas Stars with a 3-2 double overtime win. And we are breaking down all the action on a red-eye edition of the Locked On Wild POSTCAST. Seth Topal joined by Kevin Gorg. And Kevin, this series, we talked about what it was going to take for the Wild to come away with wins. And I don't know if there is a better performance the Wild could have put out there in this one. Everybody up and down the lineup, just playing huge roles. It was such a fun game to watch, and it just, with the kind of slogan for this team, grit first, coming in before the series started, it was just the perfect way to get this thing going.
Yeah, you saw an awful lot of grit out there. Block shots, hard plays, physical play, defensemen getting banged all night long on the forecheck by Dallas, killing off penalties. I mean, this was gritty, if nothing else. And there was plenty of skill. And there were plenty of great plays. Two goaltenders going toe-to-toe, two young 24-year-olds at the top of their game in between the pipes. And I look at three key players for Minnesota tonight that had never played in the Stanley Cup playoffs. I start with Filip Gustavsson. I work my way to Sam Steele. And I finish with Brock Faber. And Faber made the play of the game in that second overtime with that stick laid out to protect an open net. Remarkable how well all three played, the impact they had on this game. But as you mentioned, it was a total team effort top to bottom.
Kevin, we saw a little bit of what happened and went wrong in last year's playoff series against the Blues in that second period where the Wilds got called for a couple of penalties. Dallas immediately capitalizes on the power play. But then we saw this team, I think, take a step forward in not allowing that to let things spiral out of control. They rallied. They were able to tie the game. And so I think with all that we talked about last year's series, everybody that was part of that team is so eager to make this a new chapter and not repeat last year.
And I think of three guys, when you go through what went on last year and how disappointed they were, we had our end of the year wrap up interviews. And I think of Jared Spurgeon, Marcus Foligno, and Matt Dumba. And they were devastated after that playoff loss. And they came to training camp this year with a bit of a chip on their shoulder. And I look at the way they played tonight. Big minutes, hard minutes, and huge contributions for this team. And the one thing Marcus Foligno told me this morning is we learned some hard lessons that you cannot change who you are within the series. You've got to be the same team every shift, every period throughout the series. And we changed in that St. Louis series, and it hurt us. And the other thing he mentioned is we did not handle adversity very well. We are a different team now. We're better for going through that. And that adversity you talked about, that gut punch that was back-to-back power play goals straight off the faceoff, where Dallas now had the crowd into the game. They had momentum. And then from that point on, you saw two key factors. The Dumba hit, which was deemed clean. You never want to see anybody get hit, but that certainly sparked something where you talk about grit, that it really ramped up on both sides. And then the play that Sam Steele made, blocking a shot, having the presence to split the D, and then trusting Nyquist to get him that puck in stride, and then making a brilliant play to beat Oettinger. That will be something that I remember for a long time.
I can't say enough about what Nyquist has brought to this team, and I think he's now up to 6 points in 4 games that he's played. And you talk about that play, but just some of the other things that he does, he's super elusive with the puck, and like everybody else on the team, was just super willing to go into the boards, into multiple Dallas players, to just simply take the puck away and keep possessions going.
Gus Nyquist has unbelievable hands. And when he was practicing to get ready for his first game, I kept asking some of his teammates, saying, I really don't know this guy that well. I've seen him play for other teams, but what makes him special. And every guy right away said, wait till you see his hands. Wait till you see what he can do in small spaces on the wall. This guy's unbelievable. He's so hard to get the puck away from. And then you think, okay, tonight was career playoff game number 66. So he's been there and done that. Won on a cup run with the Sharks a few years ago. So he is one of those players that can be an X factor in a series like this because, you know, at the top of this thing, you got these two great goalies that are going to duel. You got Robertson on one side. You got Kaprizov on the other. You have those veteran studs like Tyler Seguin and Jamie Benn. And then you look at some of the players the Wild put out there, like a Johansson that's been there and done that. There isn't a lot that separates these two teams. But when you get a player like Nyquist who kind of flies under the radar, and he gets those third and fourth line matchups in the bottom six with that skill set, that can be something that could really tilt a game here or there. And tonight, it certainly benefited the Wild.
How about the defense? Spurgeon, Middleton, Brodin, Brock Faber playing in his third game, his first postseason action, and he looks like a 10-year vet out there. Matt Dumba had one of the best games I think he's had in probably a couple of years, was just unbelievable. But it goes back to that belief in, hey, we got to do the little things to come away with the win here. And to a man, every single guy, John Merrill, same thing. Every guy that played on the defensive end tonight was just sensational.
I'll work my way from the bottom up. John Merrill and Brock Faber didn't hurt this team and were on the ice when that winning goal was scored. That's pretty cool. Now I'll work my way into Jonas Brodin and Matt Dumba. They're great friends. They battle so hard. And Matt Dumba might have had his best and most important game in a Wild sweater tonight. He did things within that game that changed momentum. And then when the pressure was on and the crowd was on him, and you know Dallas was hunting Matt Dumba for some payback on Joe Pavelski, even though that hit was deemed clean, the way that Matt Dumba played from that point on, the poise that he showed, I think might have been his best game in a Wild sweater. That's saying something because this kid's an unbelievable talent. You know, we get spoiled with Jonas Brodin. We get spoiled because he's always so good, because he always takes the hit and makes the play. I'll say the same thing about Jared Spurgeon. We almost expect it. Neither Jonas Brodin or Jared Spurgeon is ever going to be confused with a big physical defenseman, yet they take hits all night long to make plays. They make the Wild a better team because of how much they care about every single sequence in every shift. And then big Jake Middleton. One of the greatest trades in the history of this organization is bringing in Jake Middleton for a goaltender that still hasn't found his NHL game. And the impact that he has playing top pair minutes with Jared Spurgeon against a big physical skating team like Dallas, you can't tell me that trade hasn't made the Wild a dramatically better team on the blue line. This guy is a heart and soul guy that does so much for this team. And that defensive core paid a price tonight, and we're a big reason that the Wild are leading this series 1-0.
We, of course, got to talk about Filip Gustavsson having one of you put that up there with any of the goalie performances this franchise has had in postseason history. It's right up there with any we've seen. So we'll talk about Gustavsson. We'll talk about what the Wild do to keep this going into Game 2. We've got all that and more as we continue today's Locked On Wild postcast. After a word from our sponsor, which is the official sports betting partner of Locked On, that is FanDuel Sportsbook. Grand slams, no-hitters, and double plays are back. And there's no better place to get in on the MLB action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, new customers can step up to the plate with a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, sign up, place your first bet, and get up to $1,000 back in bonus bets if you don't win. Don't miss your chance to get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Minnesota Wild pick up a 3-2 double overtime win over the Dallas Stars in Game 1 of their first round series. We're breaking down all the action on tonight's Locked On Wild postcast. Seth Topol joined by Kevin Gorg. Filip Gustavsson, a brick wall in net, and he did give up a couple of goals early, but we got to keep in mind too, his first start in the postseason. And so there are going to be some of those nerves, but boy, Did he put the clamps on that Dallas Stars offense, especially in overtime and double overtime, when it seemed like they were just sending wave after wave? He was just unflappable.
It's a hard building to play in for a goalie because it's so loud. It's one of the louder buildings that we see Wild hockey on the road, and it was rocking the night. You give up 2 goals in the middle of the game in a critical time, and a lot of times for a goalie at any level in their career, that can really rattle you and send you spiraling the wrong way. To his credit, he was better in the second half of this game than he was in the first half. He was brilliant in those overtimes. And, I had a conversation with him yesterday before we flew to Dallas. And I asked him, I said, well, what is it like getting ready for your first taste of NHL playoff hockey? And he said, you know what? He goes, I didn't grow up here. I know it's important. I know it's huge. But he goes, I'm really just going to treat it like another game and just see what it brings. And, that's a cool attitude to have because he's a guy that has proven throughout the regular season that he can handle the heat. And I look back at that game on the road late in the season at Colorado when the division was up for grabs, and the way he played in that game, especially in the second half of that game when Colorado came with their Stanley Cup cred push, he didn't blink. And that showed me he was ready for this stage, and tonight validated that. He was unbelievably good. Did he get some breaks? Absolutely. We had a pipe in overtime. We had the Brock Faber play. But you know what? He made 52 saves, Seth, and the Wild don't even have a chance to win that game if it isn't for the play of Filip Gustavsson throughout most of that hockey game, and he felt pretty good. Just rode the bus back with him, had a quick conversation with him, and he's exhausted. He hasn't eaten since 1:30, but he said, I've never had so much Gatorade or so much water in my system. He said, I think I'll be up all night peeing. I said, yeah, now you know what it feels like to be in your 50s.
Kevin, before we move on to game 2, let's talk Kirill Kaprizov. He had the goal tonight, and he looked like has not missed a game this year in that first period. Now, Dallas did try to slow him down a little bit as the game wore on, but exactly what you want to see from your superstar is to go in, especially early on in the game, and just take control.
Yeah, 8 goals for Kaprizov now in his last 6 Stanley Cup playoff games. That's pretty remarkable for this young man, and there's no stage too big for him. We talked about it on the broadcast tonight. The bigger the game, the bigger the moment, the more he wants to be the guy with the puck on his stick. And that's what you want from your star players. They have to want to be that guy. Now, one thing to monitor is the cross-checking he was taking. Ryan Suter, we know him from both sides of the ledger. When he played for us, now we go against Ryan Suter. He's a savvy veteran who knows how to use that stick, and he caught Kaprizov with a couple of good cross-checks, and that seemed to really catch him off guard. He's a tough kid. He can handle the beats and the hits and the slashes, but certainly something to monitor as this series goes on. The Wild are going to have to try to get him into space. I thought they did a decent job of that. I thought Minnesota was pretty good off the rush, but they didn't have that cycle game going the way I like it. When Kaprizov and Zuccarello can get that game going down below the goal line, they make life very difficult on those defenders. I'll look for that to ramp up as the series progresses.
Going into game 2, we know Dallas is going to come out swinging. They're going to try to throw everything they have. You don't want to go down 0-2, especially at home. And so for the Wilds, what do they need to do in order to weather the storm and to send this thing back to the X, potentially up 2-0?
Well, the pressure is on Dallas. And, when you win a road game like that in game number 1, you certainly swing everything in your favor. Doesn't guarantee you anything. But I will say this. Minnesota doesn't need to change one thing. They need to play a tight defensive game. They need to play physical. They need to make Dallas earn every single chance they get. And this is how the Wild have been playing. Dean Evison just spoke to us about a half an hour ago in his post-game presser and said, we've been playing desperate, physical, defensive hockey now for the better part of 3 months. That's not going to change. So you bring the same mentality, and I think if you're the Wild, it's super important not to be satisfied. Don't think about it as a big series where it has to go 6 or 7 games. Play the next game with the same desperation you played with tonight and force Dallas to bring their absolute A game to beat you. That means Oettinger has to be perfect. That means they've got to score on the power play. And if you're Minnesota, you go out there and you play with house money and you try to win a game, because if you're able to win game number 2 and go back to St. Paul 2-0, you have a legitimate chance to keep this series from going too far. And you know that Dallas has the advantage of home ice in game number 7. And likely, as we've talked about, Seth, this is going to be a long series. But after winning game 1, you don't take your foot off the gas. You try to play the exact same game you played tonight, and try to steal another road game and worry about the home games when they come on Friday.
Everybody ice up. That includes us. I feel like I played in that game and I was just sitting watching on my couch. So everybody rest up. Game 2 coming up on Wednesday. I can't wait. And it's just going to be an absolute battle. Kevin, we thank you for the time as always, breaking this one down. The Wild up 1-0. We'll see if they can make it 2-0 on Wednesday in Game 2. Locked On Wild listeners, make sure you follow along with us throughout the course of the series. We've got full episodes. We've got pregame and postgame content. We'll keep you up to date with everything going on in this series as the Wild try to make it 2-0 on Wednesday. Until then, make sure you subscribe and follow along. All part of the Locked On Podcast Network.